The year was 1696 and business was about to boom in Rhode Island, but it was also the year the first slave ship, Seaflower, arrived on the coast of the ocean state. And while some would eventually gain their freedom, most would end up here at God's Little Acre Cemetery in Newport, the biggest African burial ground in the United States. So how did the smallest state end up with the biggest African burial ground in the country? We turn to local historian Keith Stokes for answers. He has spent decades researching the burial ground and is the vice president of a historical research group in Rhode Island.
This burying ground represents the history of not only the transatlantic trade, but more importantly, it offers the history of the African people. There are African men, women, and children and families buried here. My grandparents are there, Barclay.
For Stokes, it's personal. His family, going back 9 generations, is buried here. They include slaves and freemen to college graduates and a Tuskegee Airman, and a founding member of one of the earliest African-American churches in the state.
My 4th great-grandfather, his name was October. He was a part of a grand experiment in 1795 at the age of 8, where the Quaker Barclay family decided that they wanted to end their participation in the slave trade.
About a dozen of the 300 markings represent his family. The site dates back to the early 1700s. Now work is underway to bring God's Little Acre into 2020.
The last name and hopefully first name of the people buried.
Newport's Historic Cemetery Advisory Commission and Brown University have teamed up on a project to create a high-resolution digital map of the site. Brown University says the last time any data was collected was 1903.
We wanted to help bring it a little bit more into the public eye and make it more accessible for both researchers and the public, so that that aspect of Rhode Island's history isn't glossed over as much as it is.
Once complete, visitors will be able to access information from the digital map on a smartphone or computer.
First, we're going to fly a drone up there, and we'll fly that above to get very high resolution photographs.
But to first get to the future, you have to look to the past. Stokes says in the 17th century, Africans comprised nearly 20% of the total state population, with 1 in 3 Newport families owning at least 1 slave. And according to the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database, Rhode Island for almost 50 years brought in more slaves than any other colony in the U.S., many working to produce the state's #1 export at the time.
Providence and Newport and Bristol, they're producing about 80% of the Guinea rum in the world market.
Decades later, the state would also become a refuge for Africans that gained freedom or were born into it. With religious freedom in Providence, they created their own schools and churches,
where you can worship freely, you can work, you can build and safely support a family. So Newport was known and widely known as a very important, hospitable place for free Africans. College Hill in Providence was a recognized place for free Africans.
It was here they created that new life and are remembered in death. The digital mapping is expected to be completed by next summer. I'm Courtney Carter.